Hey there, Sheryl here. It is a very special day. I'm really excited to be here with Elisa Bell. And Elisa is the Director of Mobile Products at Transurban. Elisa, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and to be here today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah, now you have had a really successful ascent in your career, and it's maybe even been a little bit of a circuitous route, and I am really looking forward to hearing about that because I think it will be incredibly inspiring to others. But before we hop into that, and before we hop into also how to really create and inspire high-performing teams, and really cohesive teams. And that's a word that's important too, because as emotions run high with COVID and back to work kind of coming or a hybrid, I think that cohesiveness is going to be incredibly important too. But before we hop into that, can you tell me a little bit about where things began for you? I know even as early as college, you did not come out of the gates as a technologist. So tell me where you started and what inspired you.
Yeah, so I've always been extremely creative. And as a kid, I danced for, I don't know, 10 plus years. I played the piano for longer than that. Very into the visual arts. But then I went to a science and tech high school. So that was completely the opposite. So I've always been good at math and I like technology, but never really considered myself to want to go into science or anything like that. So during college, what I was really attracted to was sociology. So I majored in sociology, and my mother, it's a joke now, but she's like, "Oh my God, you're going to end up selling shoes." And I was like, great. So,
nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with it. But it's a running joke. My mom's lovely. My mom's a teacher. And so for her, I think she just had a very defined career. She was a teacher, elementary school teacher, and education was always really important to her. So that was something that was embedded into my brother and I. But after college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And it kind of freaked me out because I had friends who knew I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be an engineer. I had no idea. I just knew that, okay, I've graduated from an amazing university and I want to do something that is interesting to me. So I really started just diving into roles that sounded like fun and would give me some great experiences, and things just kind of worked out from there. But if I had if I could look back now, I would have imagined I would be here today. And it's funny. I remember giving a talk to some students and I had this slide that showed my career like a zigzaggy line versus a straight line, because there have been so many turns along the way, but ultimately you always kind of land where you're meant to be. And so I kind of had roles in the financial space. I worked at Ernst & Young in business operations. I worked at Blackboard, which was a technology company. And I think that's when I really saw that product development and marketing and sales were really driving major decisions at an organization. And that's what really prompted me to go back to business school. So I think for me is, and one thing I do like to tell people is that you can end up in a STEM career, but not start out that way. You don't have to be a coder. You don't have to be an engineer by trade. It's really about the experiences that you're able to get and your transferable skills and how you can parlay that into a career in the STEM spaces if you want to be.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about that, before going live. And I think I brought up that there's consistent messages that I've heard across a lot of interviews. And you brought up something that I have heard before, but you said it in a different way. And I want to make sure to emphasize it. And that is, be less concerned about what's expected of you or what you expect of yourself. In other words, the story that you have in your mind of what you should be doing versus what you're interested in doing. So can you speak to that a little bit, in that when you said to really keep that in mind and focus on the experiences?
Absolutely. I think for me, I found myself, I'm a planner, very type A. So at 25, I want to be here. At 30, I want to be here. And at 35, I want to be here. And I think that puts so much pressure on yourself to fulfill these arbitrary checkpoints that you've put in your life instead of enjoying the journey and focusing on the experiences that you want to gain, the things you want to learn, the people you want to meet. And I think once I started to shift my mindset in that way, my growth within my career really changed. And I started to enjoy the ride a lot more than I was before. And unfortunately, I didn't think I really hit that stride into my 30s. And if I could go back and tell myself in the 20s just that, it's always interesting. I wonder where I would be. But I think it's so key to understand, what do you want to learn? What opportunities do you want to walk away with? What impact do you want to leave at an organization, versus being solely focused on, I want this title, I want to have X number of direct reports. I always go back to the why. What are you truly trying to accomplish? And I think once you focus in that way, the sky's the limit.
Yeah. And so just to reiterate that, I asked the question of, if you were to put your hands on the shoulders of your 25-year-old self, what is the one thing that you would look yourself in the eyes and say, you always need to remember this? Like, what could you share with people?
Relax and enjoy the ride. Just relax. And I think I was always uptight and really worried. I worried a lot. I was uptight. I was always concerned with, am I going to be successful? Am I successful? And I would just tell myself to just relax, take a breath, and enjoy it, because it goes by so fast, and you don't want to spend so much time worrying about where you are within your career or comparing yourself against others, that you truly miss those golden nuggets and those opportunities or those interactions with people, or those great things that you accomplish within different roles, being so focused and on whether or not you're truly achieving some fictitious benchmark you've placed on yourself. So I would tell myself to relax and enjoy.
Yeah. And I think that's not just for emerging leaders.
Right.
I work with so many amazing women who are, maybe they're a chief marketing officer and they're looking to get on a board seat. It's like, enjoy the process. I mean, I think that is just a very universal message, is what I'm
Absolutely.
saying. And so, of course, I have to ask about mindset, just to kind of marry the two worlds that we're in. And if you look at your journey and how you've, gotten to the level of success that you've seen at Transurban and even prior, what mindset has allowed you to kind of keep that worry at bay and just keep chugging along and doing the things?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think having kids forced me to change how I think and how I rewired my mind and how I talk to myself. So I think for me, it's having a mindset of being, what's the word I like to use? It's almost giving myself grace. I think once I started doing that, I was able to be more effective, because I was giving myself the permission to make mistakes. I always tell my team that if you're not making mistakes, you're probably not pushing yourself hard enough. And I think that's so true. And so I think once I was able to shift my mindset to give yourself some grace, I was a little more fearless.
Yeah, that is so important. And your team is lucky to have you, because we, as human beings, just so you know, based on the last 40 years of human performance research, we are creatures of comfort. And we all know that success lies beyond our comfort zone. We might stick our toe out there, but we're not likely to exist out there for very long by ourselves until we start to form some habits. And so it's really great that you have that mindset and that drive, and push others, because you probably see the greatness in them that maybe they don't see in themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And that really parlays into the title of what we're talking about today, and that's really building high performing but also cohesive teams. As we're in really coming into the middle of year 2 of a pandemic. We've talked about it. This was important before a pandemic, But now as we get ready to either go back to work or have a hybrid or end up staying at home working, it's just emotions are running high. Probably it's difficult to focus. So can you share a little bit about your thoughts on building high-performing teams that are cohesive? In other words, that are kind of working together like a fine-oiled engine and helping each other out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are two things that I think you have to have as a baseline, particularly as a manager or people leader, to form a cohesive and high-performing team. One is showing empathy and showing vulnerability. And I think particularly during a time like this, experiencing a pandemic, and when we've all been thrust, shut into our homes and being forced to figure out what's that balance between work and personal when it's all happening in the same place. And I think it's showing that I understand this is a hard time. I understand this is hard. I know it looks different for everyone else. And I'm willing to show you that I don't have it all together. My team knows. I'm very open and honest. And if I'm having a bad day or if I'm struggling, particularly with all the horrible things that have been going on in this world, I'm very open and I will let them know. And I think showing that vulnerability, it kind of creates this baseline, and it takes away this, I'm your manager and you report into me, versus we're human beings and we're all on this team and we are going to work together to, advance and succeed and meet a common goal. So for me, starting with being able to show the empathy and show vulnerability has led to creating true trust within the team. And I think once you have that, you can start to develop this level of respect and mutual respect with one another. And I think now more than ever, it's just everyone is dealing with this very differently, and you can't jump to conclusions about someone's performance, for example. To me, it's always taking a step back and trying to put yourself in their shoes, and being a great communicator and having an open line of communication. So, I have a small team, but I would say we're extremely close because we show those same two qualities to each other 24/7.
Yeah, so important, because a lot of times we have our own experiences, our own dialogue in our own mind, and it's difficult for us to look through the lenses of someone else. And a lot of times, just as a sidebar, when someone's underperforming, we don't know what's going on with them, especially if they're a very high performer and then they drop off. And so rather than we might flip over to, oh my gosh, that person's lazy or that person's not in the line, I think you're spot on with the communication and maybe talking to them and saying,
absolutely,
hey, I'm used to you performing here. I've seen that there's been drop off. Is there something I should know? Just giving them a little space to talk. So you bring up, that's a really great point. And I think honestly, when you can be empathetic and vulnerable, build that trust and respect, that's when your team's going to move mountains for you. That's when, if you're having a bad day, you're not there, they're going to put their head down and work.
I agree.
Yeah. So important. So thank you for bringing that up. Now, if you were to think about, how you might, leave someone who's watching this, either if they're an emerging leader, or let's say they're leading a team and they're a little concerned about the second half of the year, how it's going to go, can you leave them with some tips or tools or calls to action where they can consider and plan into the rest of the quarter and the rest of the year?
Definitely. I think it's being as transparent as you possibly can. I don't think any organization truly knows what the right answer is for, what happens when it's safe to go back outside, what's that going to look like? So I think it starts by having an open dialogue with your team and understanding with them that it's a transition period. I mean, it's not going to happen overnight, and it is going to take some figuring out of what the new normal truly is going to look like. So I think also another thing I would stress is that every person is an individual. So you have to kind of meet everyone where they are within their comfort level within this pandemic. Everyone has a different risk tolerance. Everyone has different, personal commitments and things that they have to consider. But I think as a leader, it's your job to help remove as many roadblocks as you can for your team to allow them to perform their job to the best of their ability.
Yeah, so that's so important. And then what about, I noticed that when we were also chatting before, and well, let me back up a little. Last year I interviewed Kelly Mcelhaney, and I'll tell you what she has to do with anything. She is a professor at UC Berkeley Haas School of Business, and she's the founder of the Center for Equity, Gender, and Leadership. And we were talking about gender equity, and she's like, well, Sheryl, there's a tremendous amount of inequity within our gender. And I think I conceptually knew that.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, when she said that, it just landed on me like a ton of bricks. And I've really started to look into that. There's for women of color, especially, or women who are in a group that they feel marginalized,
Mm-hmm.
there's a certain level of emotional tax. There's just certain things that they might have to deal with that maybe even other women don't have to deal with. So can you shine a little bit of light on that and maybe how we can make it better? Like we were talking, I like to talk a lot about, what's called tactical empathy. In other words, having the ability of me literally or figuratively to put on your glasses and go, okay, what's Elisa's day going to look like? Not what is it like to be Elisa, but I am Elisa, what's my day like? And so how can we, when you factor that into cohesiveness and compassion, all those things, what's one thing that, we and also that companies can start doing so we start to understand each other a little better?
That is a big question. That's a great question. Wow. So when I think, let me attack this in a couple different ways. What I think companies need to start doing, and it's not just leadership has to play a key role, but it's at every level, is working to create workplace cultures where people feel like they can come to work and be their full authentic self. They don't have to kind of show up and put on a facade as to what they think they have to sound like, look like, act like in order to succeed within that organization. I think that's where that uncomfortable tension comes in. So for an example, I'm a mom of 2 kids. And I think a lot of women can probably relate. When you have a rough morning with your kids, it is very hard to switch it off completely, to go in and run a meeting. But if you work within an organization where you feel like you don't have to be all buttoned up, and you can still be professional, but you don't have to have it all together all the time. It makes life a lot easier. And so I think being a woman of color within corporate America, I've experienced many things, from microaggressions to things that are just blatantly inappropriate and racist. And I think what others can do is to be a true ally, is to listen and try to understand, but figure out how can we help create a workplace and an environment where these things won't continue to happen. And I think a lot of it starts with having an open dialogue, and discussing these things makes everyone uncomfortable. But by not talking about what's happening, you're never going to start to figure out how you can work together to solve the problems and make environments truly inclusive. I think it's one thing to make an organization diverse, but to have an inclusive organization is completely different. And I think sometimes companies over-index in the diversity department and hire lots of great diverse talent, but how do you have an environment that's inclusive for all to thrive and really progress and do well within the organization?
Yeah, and I think so having regular dialogue, and like I said, humans are creatures of comfort.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be remiss in saying that I've never avoided an uncomfortable conversation within my family, or I have adult kids now. You know, sometimes it's you have kids too. You have to pull one aside, and you know it's not all good job. You know,
Right.
and so we all know what it's like to kind of put that off for a little bit, but being very strategic and intentional. And I think, I mean, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think people need some training on how to get the most out of these conversations, and maybe have, you know, either from an organizational standpoint, just to make sure things are communicated in the right way. And it just needs to be structured in a certain way that it's really productive, so everybody's heard, so so progress can be made.
I agree. And I think to have an effective training, people need to be open, and they have to actually show up mentally and be willing to do the work as well.
Yes, you're preaching to the choir, because I tell all of my coaching clients, I'm like, are you willing to show up? I mean, they have to go through a grueling thing, because it's not just for me, but it's really for any type. People have to be receptive and
absolutely
willing to do the work. So, well, thank you so much. This has been so enlightening and really profound. And just to recap, you're talking about the importance of being empathetic and vulnerable ourselves, and for leaders to be very empathetic and vulnerable, and to build trust, and ultimately to have respect of our team, so they in turn have respect for us, and to also have consistent communications to foster an inclusive workplace. So top talent that is diverse can be not just retained, but so they can thrive, which will in turn, someday people will recognize that it will benefit everyone. And so if you wanted to leave everyone with something, so in other words, or if you could look everyone in the eyes and leave them with something that they could really use and put in their back pocket and really be important moving forward, what would that be?
I touched on it a little bit, but it's truly stop comparing yourself to other people. Be very honest with yourself, and what do you want to accomplish? What experiences do you want to obtain? And how do you want to leave your mark at an organization or in this world? And that, I think, if you approach whether it's your career and your next role in that way, I think it opens up doors, and you might end up in a role that you wouldn't have even considered if you were truly focused on what you think the next step logically might be for yourself. I've found that no career path is linear, and ups and downs happen, but that's what makes you special and makes you resilient, and helps you do even better as you move throughout your career. So enjoy the ride. Don't be so focused on the end goal, and truly do things that make you happy and spark joy. I know it sounds so cliche, but it really, that's what I have found is allowed me to really flourish and do my best within my career.
Yeah, and I'm also hearing to try things. If someone sees something in you, and you know, maybe you're working in finance and someone pulls you into the fintech part of finance, and you're like, I'm not good at that, but hold back on the I'm not good at that and give it a try if it's interesting to you.
And that's what happened in the role I'm in now. My manager, I was in a purely marketing role, and she is an amazing person, and she saw something in me and was like, I think you could do this. And I'm doing it. And so, you know, you have to trust yourself and trust what others might see in yourself that you don't necessarily see in yourself.
Yes, I really want people to hang on to that. Trust in others and what they see in you that you might not see in yourself. I have heard that message over and over and over probably the last year and a half of doing these interviews. So it is so, so important. Elisa, thank you so much for taking time to your continued success. And I really admire what you've accomplished, and I look forward to following you.
Thank you so much.